Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am very excited that you are all here for today's session. And it's truly an honor to host Jim Kalbach, someone whose work has shaped how so many of us think about design, collaboration, and customer understanding. Jim is a chief evangelist at Mural, the leading online whiteboard platform, and he's also a noted author, speaker, and instructor in innovation design and future of work. And he's written several foundational books that many of us reference regularly, including Mapping Experiences, The Jobs to be Done Playbook, and Collaborative Intelligence. And through his writing and teaching, Jim has helped countless teams shift their mindset from building features to creating real value for people. Before joining Mural, Jim held leadership and consulting roles at major organizations like eBay, Sony, and IBM. We all know those. He's also been deeply involved in shaping the UX community globally, from co-founding the European Information Architecture conferences to editing the boxes and arrows. Outside of work, Jim shared that he also is a jazz musician, which I think says a lot about his creative spirit and ability to improvise, something we all need to a little bit more of in design and innovation. Jim, we are so grateful that you've taken time to volunteer your expertise for our
hmm
IxDF community. And so please join me in welcoming Jim Callback.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen, okay? And let me know when you see that.
Yep, you can see it.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Jim Caldbeck. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. The author of several books, as we just heard, mapping experiences, collaborative intelligence. But the topic that I wanted to talk about today is jobs to be done. And of course, I'm the author of the Jobs to be Done Playbook. We also have a website that I launched in 2020, right after the book came out, called the Jobs to be Done Toolkit, JTBD And there's some free resources and things there. We also have an online course and a live course. We actually have a live course next week. Might be a little late to sign up for that, but there's some cool things there too that I'll be pointing to. So I just wanted to make sure you had some of those materials or access to some of the materials that I might talk about. So let's get into it. Jobs to be done, okay? I'm going to start with this question. Why do startups fail? We've probably all seen some kind of statistic, 70% of startups fail, 80% of startups fail, something like that, right? And that's kind of the what, but why do they fail? And if you look into it, I invite you to Google that question while I'm talking, by the way, because it's interesting to see some of the top 10 lists and the analyses for why startups fail. And I've done that many times. Here's a snapshot of some of the things that I found. It turns out one of the top three reasons why startups fail is because they haven't identified the market need, or they lack an understanding of the customer problem they're trying to solve, right? um, and you can see there on the lower left from the Harvard Business Review that startups should instead focus on defining the customer's problem first. And the chart in the upper right there, no market need was the number one answer why startups fail, right? Lack of research, why startups fail. It turns out the same pattern applies when you look for things like why do innovation efforts fail and why do product launches fail. We find a similar pattern. Not understanding your customer needs, misunderstanding your market, right? Of course, there are, just to be fair, there are other factors that, funding, technical complications, business motions and strategy and things like that. So I'm not saying this is the only reason, but it is a top reason why startups fail, why innovation efforts fail, why product launches fail, right? Not understanding the market need, not understanding the customer problem that you're trying to solve. And this is what Jobs to be Done is squarely focused at. at addressing some of these symptoms that I found in my work, both internally and externally in different roles over the past 25 years with the organizations that I've worked for or worked with. I've found some of these symptoms. They may have an understanding of customer needs at a high level, but it's not specific enough, right? The other thing, and this is interesting that I see often, jumping to solutions too quickly, right? People get a challenge, and the first thing they say is, "What's the solution?" Right? Teams also lack common language. How do you discuss the customer needs and discuss customer problems, right? But I think confusing your solution with customer problems is probably one of the biggest symptoms that I see out there. That is conflating using your product with solving a problem. And when we really unpack it and look under the hood a little bit, and take a truly customer perspective on things, they don't see you the way that you see yourself, right? Most organizations are focused on looking at their market through the lens of them being a consumer or even a user, right? That's not how the market sees you. And what Jobs to be Done is it's a framework to help us understand problems without talking about solutions at all. This is a pretty important shift in the Jobs to be Done framework. We separate the solution, the interface, the product, the technology from the customer problem, and we're only focused on the problem space. Using your product is not the customer problem. Their problem is to get the job done, right? And that's what I wanted to talk about then, Jobs to be Done as a framework. But first, I just wanted to pause a little bit on some of the theory behind it. I like this quote from Theodore Levitt. He's a famous Harvard business professor from the 60s and 70s, and he used to like to tell his students that people don't want a drill, they want a hole in the wall. This is a common quote. Many of you have heard this before. But if you read into it a little bit, kind of the essence of Jobs to be Done is there, right? And for me, the metaphor here is that the drill is a means to an end, right? The drill is the means to the end. The end is a hole in the wall. And what he's suggesting here, and again, this is in MBA classes, right? He's teaching business school, right? So he's telling his MBA students that there's business opportunity, there's opportunity for growth, there's opportunity from innovation if we shift our attention away from the drill towards the whole. That is, let's put our own solution, technology, products, and offerings aside for a moment. And when I say aside, I mean completely aside. We don't talk about any technology solutions or methods in Jobs to be Done, and we're only focused on the customer problem that they're trying to reach, the whole, right? Now, people have also quibbled about the words here. Yeah, they don't want a whole, they want to hang a picture, they don't want to hang a picture, they want to renovate a room, and we can get into the hierarchy of it, but I don't think we need to do that here. For me, the essence of Jobs to be Done is encapsulated right in this quote as it's written, in that there's a shift. There's a shift away from the drills to the holes, away from the solution to the problem to be solved. So I'm going to make 3 points in my talk here. And the first point that I want to make is that Jobs to be Done is a framework that provides a shared language for pinpointing customer needs independent of technology and solutions, right? So we can get that specificity that we need. We can also avoid jumping to solutions too quickly. And we also have a shared language. And this shared language is not just for design teams or product teams, it's for the entire organization. Because one thing to remember, as I just hinted at in the quote that I just mentioned, Jobs to be Done is not a design framework. It was not created for designers by designers or by designers for design. It was created by the business community to understand the markets that they serve. In that sense, Jobs to be Done has a broad appeal across an organization. Right. And I've been working with sales teams, marketing teams trying to adopt this framework. I've even been working with HR teams trying to adopt this framework to help them understand the people that they serve better. Right. So Jobs to be Done has this broad appeal, and it becomes a shared language that you can use across the organization. What I want to do now is, that's just a high level description of what Jobs to be Done is. It's a framework. that we can use to understand the market need. And by the way, going back to the startup problem that I started off with, the question there, we can do this even if we don't have a product in the market, because we're not studying products, we're studying humans, right? And it helps us predict adoption. So Jobs to be Done helps us predict adoption. That is, we can look at the factors why people will adopt our solutions or technology before we even start building them. But this brings up a really big question, is like, well, how do we do that? How do we understand human behavior and customer needs if we're not talking about our own product or solution, right? And that's what I want to talk about now. So in the second section of my presentation, I want to go into the methodology in a little bit of detail. My point here is not to, this isn't a training course. I don't expect you to be able to run a Jobs to be Done project after this talk. That takes a little bit of practice, actually. But what I wanted to do is impress upon you just the amount of rigor that goes into the Jobs to be Done methodology. First of all, we have this core process. I've kind of oversimplified it here to some degree into three larger phases. First of all, we have to frame our field of inquiry. Any customer discovery or research effort has a framing function, right? Who are you going to talk to and what are you going to talk to them about? You have to make that decision up front. And then there's the discovery portion where you actually go out and do research. Contrary to some of the myths out there, Jobs to be Done is not made up, it's based on research. But then after you do that, after you distill the insights using the framework that I'm about to show you, what you need to do is activate those insights. And that's what I call the spin phase or the spin cycle, that you need to kind of enable and bring those insights back into the team in a meaningful way, right? You have to sell your ideas and you have to sell your insights to some degree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these phases and just show you how the framework works. Again, my intent here is to impress upon you the kind of the systematic approach and the rigor in the Jobs to be Done framework, not necessarily for you to be taking notes so that you can repeat this. So I'm going to go fairly quickly is basically my disclaimer here. Along with that core process come the key elements of the Jobs to be Done framework. I've represented them in the Jobs to be Done canvas. This is available for download on the Jobs to be Done toolkit website. There, you can download this for free. But the Jobs to be Done framework comes with kind of predefined categories that you're listening for, that you're looking for in the marketplace. First of all, right in the center there at the top, you see that in big bold letters there, the focus job. The unit of analysis in Jobs to be Done is the job to be done. We care about the job performer in the upper left there. We care about the human being, but we're focused mostly on understanding that job. Right? And we describe the focus job using four categories of information. What are the steps, the chronology, and how job performers get it done? What are their measures of success or the success criteria? What are the emotions they have while they're doing the job? And what are the circumstances or situations that they may be in that make a difference in how the job gets done? So we describe the focus job from our primary research using those four facets of information. So what I want to do now is show you that process, the three-stage process, and these key elements and how they work together to be able to understand the customer problem without talking about your own solution. So the first phase is framing your Jobs to be Done landscape. We need to know, before we go out into the field, we need to know who we're going to talk to and what are we going to talk to them about. In Jobs to be Done, we frame the first question there, the who, as the job performer. We need to settle on and declare a job performer, right? In this case, I'm going to use an example throughout this portion of the presentation that if we're in the field of buying and selling homes, right? Let's just say that's our domain. That's the arena that my company, my organization works in. We're in the business of buying and selling homes. You can think of this as real estate if you wanted to. I like to describe it in terms of human terms. We're in the business of buying and selling homes, right? So if that's the domain that we're in, that kind of frames this first question. Who do we want to create value for? And guess what? You can list all of the stakeholders or all of the actors, I call, in the field, right? You can think of this as a lightweight stakeholder mapping. In the field of buying and selling homes, we have sellers and we have buyers. That's pretty obvious. But you also have real estate agents and lenders, movers, loan officers, neighbors, family, home inspectors. And there's probably more that we can list, more stakeholders in that playing field that we can list. And that's what you need to do as a team first, is basically do a stakeholder map, but then strategically what you want to do is nominate one of them to answer the question, who do you want to create value for? In my example here, I'm going to say, let's focus on home buyers. So jobs to be done is going to ask you to be very singular and very focused. Right. And this is another symptom that I see with a lot of teams, that they're thrown a ton of variables. There's all kinds of stakeholders they're trying to create value for. There's all kinds of goals that they have. There's all kinds of products. And what jobs to be done does is that underneath all of that, let's get down to the core. We're trying to create value for home buyers. And what are they trying to get done? So jobs to be done is very singular and very focused. That is a good thing because a lot of teams need focus, right? So we're going to focus on home buyers. We're not saying these other people are not important. We're just saying we're going to focus on them for now. The next question then we need to say, once we declare the job performer, is what can we help them get done? Well, what are they trying to get done? So what you do as a team is you list all of their jobs. And by the way, if you can't do this from information you already have, you might have to go out and do a little bit of research and talk to customers. What are you trying to get done? They're trying to renovate a home, shop for a new home, move homes, sell old homes, find a dream home, finance a home, learn about neighborhoods, decide on an area to look, and so forth and so on. There's probably more. I'm just showing a couple of examples here. Then what you need to do is say, which of these jobs do we want to make our focus job? And let's say, for the sake of argument here, we want to shop for a new home. So what we've done is we framed the who, the home buyer, and the what, shop for a new home. Again, these other things are not unimportant. We're just saying for now, for our research, we want to focus on that. Now, this is a strategic conversation that you have to have because deciding on the job performer and the focus job has to be strategically relevant to your organization, but it also needs to be something that matters to your market. So really what you're looking for is that sweet spot between what matters to the people that you serve and what matters to your organization right now. Then you can declare a focus job and make that your unit of analysis for the researcher. For your research. We use the top part of the jobs to be done canvas to have that conversation, to do the framing part of the jobs to be done analysis. What I just said, I also represented here in this Venn diagram, right? The focus job is something that's important to the people that you serve, and it's also important to your organization right now. And that makes sense. If any of us work for commercial organizations or even a government organization or academic organization for that matter, you don't want to go out and do research and find out information and answer questions that nobody else in the organization has, right? We want to have our research focused on something that's important to the organization. So deciding on the focus job is kind of this, there's a duality there. What's important to the people you serve and what's important to your organization. But once I have that focus job in hand, now what I can do from the bottom up is I can look at those 4 categories of information. What are the job steps in getting that done? What are the success criteria? What are the emotions? And what are the circumstances? And this now comes from, in our second phase, we're going to go into discovery mode here, right? We're going to go out and talk to job performers. Jobs to be done begins with qualitative research. We can think of a small sample size of 6 to 8. Usually I'm in the 12 job performer category for a nice project. I've done projects with 20 and even 40 people. If you've ever done qualitative research, you know that a 20 person sample size in qualitative research is a lot, right? We're talking about hour-long interviews here, right? But what your job is to do here as the researcher is to talk to them about how they get the job done. And from that, you want to extract those 4 categories of information, right? So you talk to the job performers, and then you need to categorize and formulate the insights that you hear from that qualitative research, right, into those 4 buckets of information. I'm going to double click and go even lower here. I'll get into the weeds. So we're in the weeds here, guys. But what I want to show you is how the framework works at a very detailed level. People are not going to talk to you in terms of jobs to be done. They're not going to talk to you in terms of that framework that I just showed on the canvas, right? It's your job to listen to what they say and translate it back into the jobs to be done language, right? So these are predetermined categories that you're kind of coding, right? If anybody's done qualitative research in coding, this is a type of coding, but I know my 4 codes: the job steps, the success criteria, the emotions, and the circumstances, right? So this is natural language. This is something that somebody might say, a home buyer. Let's say we went out and talked to home buyers and they said this: I want to identify suitable homes quickly. In jobs to be done, we very carefully separate those elements out and we don't conflate them, right? We also separate out any reference to technology. So we're not talking about technology at all here. But if the person said, I want to identify suitable homes, we need to parse that for the different elements. And there's actually, in that simple, innocent sentence, there's actually 3 different statements that we record within our jobs to be done framework. First of all, identify potential homes, right, is a job step. So I've coded that orange. My job steps are orange, right? The word suitable is an adjective. In jobs to be done, we don't mix up adjectives with the job steps. So we don't say identify quick potential homes quickly, because the word quickly or suitable, let's say start with suitable. The word suitable is its own it's its own statement. It's its own factor that we separate out. So we separate the steps from the success criteria. On the right, in the green there, are the success criteria. Right. So I take the word suitable and I rewrite it as minimize the likelihood of finding irrelevant options. That's my interpretation of the word suitable. The word quickly becomes minimize the time it takes to identify potential homes to consider. Right. So from this one sentence, I actually got 3 pieces of information. There's a lot of signal here and not a lot of noise. If you've ever done qualitative research, you know there's usually more noise than signal. But your job is to then comb through what you heard from the market and categorize and formulate the insights into that framework. If you were to do this over and over again and you had 12 interviews for an hour long, that's how many pages? That's like 360 pages of text or something like that. You would have a pile of job steps, a pile of success criteria, a pile of emotions, and a pile of circumstances. So we very carefully listen and separate things out. Jobs to be done comes with rules of formulation, and the words and the language that you use matters a lot. So it's very, very rigorous in how we record things. So if I go back to the canvas, let's say I finished my 12 interviews, right? I'm going to have the job steps there in orange, and I can arrange those into a chronological sequence that shows me how the job performer gets the job done. Again, completely independent of technology or solutions. I don't care about your product. That's what I tell my clients, by the way. When I go and teach jobs to be done, I say, I don't care about your solution. We're not talking about your solution. I don't even know what you guys sell. I want to talk about your customer problems, right? So you notice those job steps: decide to shop for a home, determine the criteria, identify sources to look, learn about the market, seek available homes, compare the homes, reassess your criteria if needed, confirm selections, decide on a home. These are universal. They're universal and they're also timeless steps, right? That's how people shopped for a home 50 years ago. I don't care if you're online on Zillow and it's AI driven, you're still doing these steps, right? So we're future-proofing our thinking by removing technology from it, by the way. I also have a pile of success criteria. I'm only showing a couple dozen there, or what is that, 20 there. You'll actually have about 50 of these statements. You have 50 of these detailed statements that show how well the job performer got the job done. I'll also have about 20 emotions and 20 different circumstantial factors. That's what I call circumstances. Each of these are described as discrete statements that are singular. We don't use ands or ors. Notice all the job steps and all the success criteria. There's no ands or ors in there, right? We're not conflating things. These are individual and atomic. So I can get very granular and very, very specific about describing how the focus job gets done. Right? Now what I want to do is I want to analyze this data. So one of the first things I can do is I can take the job map and I can find the hotspots. What's a hotspot? It's where the customer has the most pain or the hardest step to get done, right? And you might do this as a team activity. You might ask some of the job performers that you interviewed, what's the hardest thing for you to get done? But you basically want to prioritize this bucket of information. Right, the job step bucket of information. In this case, I'm saying determine the criteria and comparing available homes. Those are your 2 steps that are hardest to get done. I can also take all of the success criteria and I can quantify them in a survey. So if I had 50 success criteria, the green stickies on my previous slide, I can take each one of those statements and put it into a market-facing survey and survey a quantitative sample of people and ask them for each statement two questions. How important is this to you, and how satisfied are you in achieving this? So now I have numerical data on 2 different dimensions for each one of my success criteria statements. This survey would go on. If I had 50 of them, there would be 50 items there, and two data points for each. What I can then do is I can take those success criteria, the quantification of it, and plot it or visualize it on a grid like this. On the bottom are the scores for important, the average score of importance for each one of the statements represented by the green boxes here, and the average score for satisfaction, right? What this allows me to do is identify very, very clearly this lower right-hand corner here. These are the success criteria for getting that job done that the market has in a quantitative way told you are very important for them, but they're dissatisfied in their ability to get that done. It's hard for them to get those things done currently, right? That's where your innovation opportunities are going to lie, right? So if I go back to the fleshed out canvas, what I do after I've collected all of these pieces of information, these discrete statements that really describe the focus job in excruciating detail, what I can do is prioritize each one of these buckets separately. I can, in a qualitative way, prioritize the job steps. In a quantitative way, I can prioritize the success criteria. Same with the emotions and the circumstances, right? So I've really, in a lot of specificity, broken down that focus job, our unit of analysis, into a lot of detail and categorized it very carefully, and then prioritize each one of those categories. This gives me a lot of signal on, within the space of this job, thinking about shopping for a new home, what are the hardest steps to get done? What are the success criteria that represents the unmet need? What are the top emotions that people either have or want to avoid having? What are the circumstances that matter the most? Right? I can then take those 4 elements and rewrite them, describe the pain point from my research. I can describe my pain point in something called a job story. And what a job story is, it's kind of a writing technique that synthesizes the struggle that you heard in the marketplace, right? And this takes some of the top prioritized elements from each of the buckets and brings it back down together. So when I'm comparing available homes, that's a job step. How do I know to focus on comparing available homes? Because that got prioritized, right? We had some way of prioritizing that. And I'm unfamiliar with neighborhoods. Also, that's a prioritized circumstance, right? I want to be able to get an immediate sense of what it might like to live in a specific area. So I can reduce the lack of knowledge of my neighborhood. That's a success criteria that got prioritized, and feel confident about my choice on where to live. That's an emotion. The word confident is emotion, right? So in Jobs to Be Done, we frame the focus job, we research it in very careful detail, separating those categories of information. We basically blow it up into these little bits. Then we prioritize them individually and bring it back down together into a single statement that represents the pain that we've heard in the market. Now, this doesn't remove the need to write a research report. You might still have a deck in a research report, but the job story format is a really handy way to then move to the next stage, which is what I call spin. And spin is really about bringing the insights that you got from the research back to your team, right? And this is one thing that I find in research in general that we're not great at. We believe sometimes that the merit of our own presentation or the merits of our own report will be obvious to the people around us. Very often it's not. Your stakeholders, your people in your teams, they need help imagining how the customer insights that you found in your research actually connect to what the heck they should do next. And that's what the spin cycle is trying to make that connection and helping the people in your team understand the implications of something like this as a description of a pain point, how that translates into product requirements or roadmaps or marketing campaigns. And that's really what the spin cycle that I was talking about really focuses on. So the core process is framing the focus job, going out and doing discovery, and very carefully analyzing the bits of information that you extract and prioritizing them, and then synthesizing those back down in a way that you can make actionable. Also in the spin cycle are activities, workshops, discussions, exercises that you can do with your team. So it kind of breaks down to this, the core process of jobs to be done. You need to determine the who and the what, because before you do any research, you have to know who you're talking to and what you're talking to them about. In jobs to be done, we do the framing in terms of the focus job. That frames our that's our field of reference. Right? Once we have that focus job, that's what we want to understand. Again, other stakeholders and other jobs may be important, but for this research effort, we're singular. We're focused on that who and that what, right? But then we go out and investigate the job. It starts with qualitative investigation, can move to quantitative, and what you're looking for are the prioritized struggles or pain points. And then finally, you need to synthesize those. A job story this is just one way to do it. It's an example of a format to synthesize those findings and activate them in a way that other people around you can really understand and act on. So the second point that I want to make here, and then I just have a few more slides and we can take some questions. I don't know if there's any coming in yet, but if you have questions, you can start putting them in the chat. I can't look over there right now because I'm doing too many other things, but I'll get to the chat after this. The second point I want to make is that jobs to be done is a very structured language, and that was my point of showing you all that methodology there. It's very structured, it's highly rigorous. There's a lot of myths out there that jobs to be done is just kind of made up and it's superficial. That's not true at all. It's deep research, and it integrates human-centered opportunities into value creation inside of your organization. The thing that it does is it provides focus. The idea of focusing on one job performer and one focus job helps you and your team together to place strategic bets, and then unpacking that in detail then usually gives a rationale for why you're focusing on what you should focus on. Like, where do requirements come from in your organization? How do roadmaps get made in your organization, right? How do decisions about marketing campaigns get made in your organizations? And are they customer-centric? What I'm advocating here is that we can use this framework as inputs into any of those things to remain customer-centric throughout the entire whatever you're doing, any workflow that you're doing. Because being customer-centric is not having your support team answer the phone with a smile. Being customer-centric is having a vision, mission, and strategy that's customer-centric, or goals that are customer-centric, or a roadmap that's customer-centric. And for me, jobs to be done has been one of the best ways to influence those types of things. The last thing that I want to talk about then is that jobs to be done is a customer-centered framework for what I call a human-centered business, right? It's not enough that a design team is working in a human-centered way. We want the whole organization to be thinking this way. And because jobs to be done is not a design-specific framework, because it came from the business community, I have found it appeals to other stakeholders. It appeals to other stakeholders in strategy because you can use it to help define your company direction. Marketing teams can use it to help develop campaigns and how they're talking to the market. Sales teams, the framework has helped them enhance their discovery calls, for instance. Obviously, product and development, you can prioritize capabilities around user needs. But customer success, you can plan account development based on desired outcomes and support in HR and so forth. That I've really found that jobs to be done becomes a language that others can use, a common language across the company. And that's what Des Traynor talks about. He's a co-founder of Intercom. It's an online platform that allows two-way communication between customers and a software provider through the software. If you ever open the software and it says, "Hey, chat with us right now," that's one example of something that Intercom is capable of doing. But Des is actually a designer himself, so he's a designer founder, which is great. That's how I got to know him because we were at UX conferences together. And then he became a founder and a business leader, but he used jobs to be done very, very early on. This is almost 20 years ago now, probably at Intercom. And he says that jobs to be done gave us a better way to frame what we felt, right? It's not just about thinking about the product. It's about, it's become a marketing strategy at Intercom, as well as informing research, sales, and support, right? So this kind of common language that jobs to be done provides appeals to other departments and disciplines within our organization, and that's what Des is reflecting here. Another example here from Stepstone. Flooring came to us a couple years ago. Stepstone is a large a jobs platform in England and in Germany. And he was the head of the product team there, the chief product officer. And we trained up about 400 people in his organization around jobs to be done. And they're launching capabilities and features now that are making a splash in the marketplace because they addressed unmet needs. We didn't have that symptom that we saw at the beginning when I was asking why do startups fail, because they knew in advance what the market wanted through the jobs to be done framework. It also brought focus and alignment too. Those are not unimportant aspects of the jobs to be done framework. This idea of focusing, clarifying your variables, the who and the what, but also aligning the teams. And that's what the spin phase is really for, is about alignment. I think that's important to bring into our research as well. So third and last point there, the jobs to be done is a way of seeing your entire business from the outside in, right, for a more human-centered organization. And that's really, I think for me, the appeal of jobs to be done as a specific framework is that we can talk about being customer-centric or human-centric at scale with jobs to be done. So that's all I had for my main presentation. We got about 22 minutes left, Neha.
That's great.
Okay.
I am checking with folks. There are two questions in the chat. I'm
All
checking
right.
with folks if they would like to unmute and come and talk to you. But I'm really
Yeah.
interested in learning about the spin cycle. Being a
Yeah.
researcher myself,
Yeah.
and having followed the jobs to be done,
Yeah.
and I can tell you that job stories are extremely powerful because
Yeah.
they really clarify what
Right.
we should be working on and
Yeah.
why. But the selling of it sometimes is
Yeah.
not sometimes, oftentimes is difficult. So I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
wondering, like even for
yeah,
myself,
yeah, I know. It's a great point, and it's probably one of the hardest things to do. And I didn't want to just kind of wave over it with my hand and say, "Oh, yeah, you have to activate the insights." I know it's very, very difficult, right? I don't think there's a silver bullet or one thing that you can do, Neha. I think it's a combination of things that you need to do. I think it's how you storytell back to the organization, right? Here's what you don't want to do. Hey, I did all this great research. Please see my 20-page PDF report attached to the email, right?
right?
If you do that, right, even if they open your email, right, and then open the PDF, right, they're not going to dig into that 20-page thing. So that's an extreme on the one side. On the other side, I think what we want to be thinking more about doing is something like taking a job map. Just take the job map and bring it into a lightweight conversation. I'm not talking about a day-long workshop. I'm talking about an hour. Get
Mhm.
an hour with your PM and developers and walk through and say, hey guys, next quarter, we have our roadmap, we have these things. Which one of these steps are we trying to support with that?
Yeah,
How are we helping the customer get done? And just have that conversation with them, or do some kind of dot voting with them, or some kind of grading or ranking system with that. And a job map is really easy to create, right? It's not that hard to get to a job map. Certainly not as difficult as doing the quantification. So these are lightweight things that you can do that kind of bring your insights to life. Because as I said, very often we think the merit of our insight is going to, ensure its survival, but that's not the case at all. That you have to sell your ideas, you have to persuade people, and I don't mean overly, outright. I mean it's like inviting them in and say, hey, we just want to have this conversation to see how our roadmap aligns with what customers are trying to get done, and having those conversations and just doing that over and over again, I think is small multiples is bigger than we're going to do an 8-hour workshop and a 20-page report and then I'm out of here. Like that doesn't work either, right? So there are things that that I can talk about, like writing goals or OKRs. If anybody uses the OKR format, using the jobs to be done insight to help you write OKRs, right? And there's a way to do that too. We're looking at Teresa Torres's opportunity solution tree. If you know the continuous discovery habits from Teresa Torres, that book, she talks about the opportunity solution tree. Guess what? The opportunities are customer opportunities. You can plug your job stories or your unmet needs right into that hierarchy that she talks about with the opportunity solution tree. So I think it's a combination of those types of things that you need to do to activate your insights. What are the formats you're using to communicate in? Like you said, Neha, a job story is a great compact format that anybody can digest. It fits on a slide, right?
Mhm.
You can put it on top of a requirements document. Like thinking about that type of integration of your insights into documentation, but also integration in terms of activities and conversations that you have. That's really what the spin cycle is about.
Yeah, well, thanks for that.
Yeah.
What I take away from it is like making it easier for stakeholders to interact with the insights,
That's
and
right. That's right.
whatever that looks like, get them to kind of interface with it and
Yep.
have a conversation. And by doing that, that
Yeah.
will stick.
I agree. And, the thing that I found, because I have a UX background, like I guess a lot of people on the call are UX research, design, interaction design, right? I think it's part of our nature and part of our job to be able to imagine that when you do any kind of research, that you can coordinate the insights that you learn from human beings, right? We're good at understanding human behavior, and we can coordinate that and translate that into, okay, what should the business do? What
Hmm.
should the roadmap look like? Other people are not good at making that mental connection,
Right.
right? Product owners, business stakeholders, bean counters, right? The finance people, they're not good at doing that, right? So flashing up a report and a bullet point, as valid as your research may be, it's not going to have that persuasion. And the word spin actually comes from spin selling. If anybody knows selling tech, there's this technique called spin selling. So we kind of borrowed that label because it's like you got to sell your insights. You know what I mean? And not being about I'm not trying. It's not transactional. I don't want to say it's selling and transactional, but it's this kind of like you said, making it interactive and helping people make sense of it better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thanks for that.
Um, so Olivia has a question about, is it feasible to build a jobs to be done model from quantitative data alone, or is it qualitative research that is necessary as a starting point?
It's qualitative. You start with qualitative, right? So I start with almost an ethnographic mindset, right? I'm going to go out and talk to that job performer, not as a customer of my product, because I don't care about my own product at that point in time. I want to know what the job is that they're trying to get done. And I talk to them about them getting their job done, right? And we're listening for the job steps, the success criteria, the emotions, and the circumstances. So it begins with a qualitative understanding, a valid real world understanding of the job performers and in specific, the job, right? That's our unit of analysis. We're trying to describe that job. What we're doing is we're listening and extracting all of those elements. One of the advantages of the jobs to be done framework is we don't prioritize anything until we've collected everything. So we don't do a couple of interviews and go, oh my God, I heard something that completely surprised me. I don't need to do any other interviews. We continue to collect things until we have a complete set of job steps, a complete set of success criteria, a complete set of emotions, and a complete set of circumstances before we go and prioritize those things. So we want to check our own biases as researcher at the door and not make conclusions about what is the most important to the market, right? Because one thing that I found is if you do it that way, that is get a comprehensive list of everything and then prioritize it, your prioritization doesn't always match the market's prioritization. That they're
Mm,
going to say things are harder, they're going to say different things are harder to get done than you do, right? So we want to check our biases at the door, and that's a real strength of the jobs to be done framework is this comprehensiveness before we make conclusions. That all
yeah,
comes from qualitative research, and you can do it. It can be done, yeah.
cool. Awesome. So Michael asked, how would it integrate within the design thinking process,
Yeah,
or would it be better to use jobs to be done independently,
I
depending
think
on.
hey, Michael,
Hi.
thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for that question. No, that's a great one too. And I actually work for a company that sells design thinking. I practice design thinking, my whole career. D school, I'm familiar with all of those types of things. I think they work together. They actually work together. One thing that I found in design thinking, are you familiar with the D school version of design thinking? Do you know the D school? They have those 5 steps.
Mhm.
Empathize. What's the next? I think you start with empathize. I forget the
Yeah,
5 steps.
yeah. Discover and then ideate, prototype, and
Ideate, right? Yeah. There's this notion in design thinking about a point of view. Before you go ideate, you need a point of view, right? I have asked people at the D school, I've asked design thinking practitioners around the world, how do you decide systematically? How do you decide on your point of view? Right? And it's really fuzzy. It's not that great, Michael, if you unpack design thinking about what are you going to take into brainstorming and why are you taking that into brainstorming. And one thing that I've heard is the thing that surprises the researcher the most. And like, how freaking biased is that? You know what I mean? Right? So I think what jobs to be done can do is before you create a how might we statement, right? If I prioritize all those buckets of information, I can say, how might we help this customer get this job step done so they can reach these outcomes? You can write a really powerful how might we statement from the jobs to be done insights that is based on real world, right? So here's the other thing too, Michael. That jobs to be done tells you what problem to solve. It doesn't tell you what solution to create. And so one of the first things you need to do is do design thinking like ideation, right? After you do the jobs to be done kind of ends right there. It says, here's the problem to solve, right? And your team is going, okay, Michael, what am I going to do? Oh, let's do some ideation, right? So you can take that jobs to be done insight and bring it right into your design thinking process. But it gives it more, I think it gives design thinking more power, in my opinion.
yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you for that.
Cool. Or you're
We have
probably
one
not
more.
D school. You're probably the Hasso-Plattner Institute. You're probably more familiar with, right?
Yeah, both.
Well,
Actually, the double diamond is the one I use.
yeah,
And now the
right.
newer version with the Stingray with AI and all the things
Yeah,
that.
cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, so Monica has a question. How do you help a team come back from the solution mind frame? They are already into
Yeah.
come to the job description starting point.
Yeah. It's tough. I'm coaching a team right now. I'm coaching a research team right now. And that was the conversation we had this morning. How do you get people into this mindset? It's not easy. And it's probably not going to be a one-time thing. But what I've seen are a couple of things. Is from the bottom up, and from the bottom up, I mean, the individual contributors, the researchers, the people working on a project, right? And you want to bring them along on the journey. You might need to explain what jobs to be done is and why you're doing this, right? You can say to your team, hey, I think we have blind spots. We have blind spots in the marketplace. I want to understand our blind spots, and jobs to be done is a framework that helps us do that. However, in order to do that, we have to forget about our own solution just for a minute. Don't worry, we'll get back to your requirements in a second, but we're just going to temporarily take a sidestep and understand the problem, right? So the first thing you might need to do is to explain what the jobs to be done framework is. That may not always work, though. I think the other thing, though, is doing these lightweight activities. You might not even tell them it's jobs to be done. Bringing a team a job map and saying, hey, can you help me understand how the requirements map to what our customers are trying to get done, and actually doing those lightweight activities, right? If you do that over time, I think people start to see value in it, and then you have an example and you can say, oh, I did that with that team, I can help this team over here as well too. So building up the muscle from the bottom up. The other thing that I've seen from the top down is when you have, like Florin, I gave this example right here. This was a great project to work on. He was the CPO, and he said, I want everybody in my organization to be thinking this way, right? So if you can get top level support, that's that's probably one of the quickest ways to make progress, right? But typically in an organization, what it's a combination of top level support, that there's somebody in a decision making position that says, I want to leverage the jobs to be done framework, but then also the team from the bottom up knowing how to work some of these tools and bringing it into those conversations. So top down and bottom up is the best way to do it, I think.
Awesome. I'm wondering if for the recording, if we could stop the share and so the
Okay,
recording could see you.
there you go.
Um,
Here I
so
am.
Zoe has a question about how would you talk to a team about doing qualitative research who is more comfortable relying on secondary research and quantitative research?
Yeah, I mean that I've been having that conversation for 20 years in my career, right? I bet all of us are facing that. And then sample size is the other one. What? You only talked to 12 people? We just did a survey with 500 people. Why should I listen to your data? So that's a perennial question that we have, I think, in the research field, usability testing, user research, all of those kinds of things. It's a tough one. Again, usually it's a changing mindsets over time type of thing. But one thing that I like to highlight is the difference between what I call thin data, usually quantitative data, and I call it thin not because you don't have a lot of it. You actually have a lot of it, but it doesn't tell the whole story. It only tells what happened. With thick data, and thick data is usually qualitative data, which tells you why, right? So I very often like to shift the conversation away from teams that are addicted to quantitative data. Most organizations are completely addicted to quantitative data only, right? And say, yeah, okay, that's great. You described what happened, but why? Why did it happen, right? And very often they don't know. And he said, well, I can find out. Give me runway to talk to 12 people, and I will dig under the surface, and I'll tell you about all those motivations and all the whys, right? So just making some of those contrasts between what and why, or thick data versus thin data, and then trying to make a proof of concept, or something that you can point to. I think this is very important if you're trying to bring in something like jobs to be done, or even just trying to change the mindset of your organization. Get a project that is successful that you can point back to. And I don't mean a generic case study outside of your organization. Don't show them something from my book. I have little use cases that's not going to convince your stakeholders. Your stakeholders are going to care about the project team right next to them. So get an internal case study and prove out the value of qualitative research if that's what you want to do, or jobs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of intentional work,
Yeah.
but knowing the direction that you need to go can actually at least get you started.
Agreed. That's exactly it. And if you don't have that top level support, like if you don't have a business stakeholder saying, no, we're all doing this in the organization, it's a long journey. What I just described might be changing the mindset of the teams around you or the culture around you. It might be a multi-year journey, right? Doing this, brick by brick kind of thing. And that can be very frustrating. And you hit your own limits of tolerance sometimes. I've been there.
Yeah. Does CPO stand for Chief Process Officer?
Chief Product Officer.
Product Officer.
So the entire product organization, it's CPO, right?
Okay, because I think
it's C-level. They usually report right to the CEO. They usually have multi-million-dollar budgets or whatever for technology, and in this case he was head of 400 people, so a fairly large organization, right? And it really helps when you talk to the people in that organization about jobs to be done, or whatever framework you're talking about. Here we're talking about jobs to be done. It really helps if you can go, yeah, Florin wants you to do this, right? It's really easier if you have top-down support.
Yeah, well, my mind went to Star Wars 3CPO, so I was like, I should ask.
C3PO, yeah.
Well, we have 4 minutes left, but none of the conversation that we are having nowadays would be complete without mention of AI. So we have a question about AI. Do you currently use AI tools to generate, synthesize, or analyze research insights? This is from Olivia.
Yes, I do. And the interesting thing about jobs to be done, because it's solution agnostic and technologically agnostic, it actually works really, really well with AI, right? Because you can't ask AI. Well, I guess you could ask AI. about the usability of your product or something like that. But if you're focused on your own solution, right, the amount of information that AI is going to give back to you is limited, right? But because we're talking about human behavior, AI does a really good job at describing that, right? Because it can draw from a lot of different resources. The other thing about jobs to be done is because it's such a highly structured language. Remember, I told you each one of those 4 categories, the job steps, success criteria, emotions, and circumstances, each one of those buckets, those individual sticky notes and statements, they have their own format and rules of formulation. The word you begin with, the order, the grammar of those, the syntax of those are very structured, and LLMs like structure, right? So you can say, hey, generate 12 job steps, and I want them exactly in this format, right? And it'll do a pretty good job. So I've used AI in a couple of different ways. One is I've used it to generate some of those elements. You can ask it to generate a job map in a given field, and it'll do it. It's usually not great, so you need the human judgment on top of it, but it can really get you started, right? The other thing that you can use AI for is if you do interviews, qualitative interviews, and I've seen people do this, and I think what you're going to start seeing on the marketplace are tools that will do this for you automatically within the jobs to be done framework, is you can run those interviews through the AI and it'll do the extraction for you. It'll say, this person mentioned 10 job steps and they have, 10 success criteria, whatever it is. And it'll actually do the analysis of the interviews for you. The other thing that I'm hearing about too is actually using synthetic users where you set up a persona in AI and then you query it back and forth. I'm not a huge fan of that. And I actually don't know why you would even do that if I can just generate the stuff right from AI. Like, well, it can just tell me the job steps. I don't have to do the interview one by one with a computer. But however you use AI, I'm still a staunch believer of doing some real interviews. So using AI with jobs to be done might reduce your sample size, but I think you still need to go out in the field and talk to human beings for a couple of reasons. One is I always find that AI misses things. I did an AI analysis not too long ago, and within my first real human interview, I found 3 things that AI didn't. I was 15 minutes into the interview, and I'm finding all the stuff AI didn't tell me, right? And it was really good stuff as well too. The other thing is, in order to judge whether the AI within the jobs to be done framework is giving you the right things, the quote unquote right things, you have to have the sensibility of what the real world is. Right? If you're not out there in the field, you're not going to be able to judge whether AI is telling you the right things or not. So you need that sensibility as a researcher, having done those interviews, to bring back to your judgment of AI.
Love that. I totally agree with it.
Yeah.
I mean, on a side note, I keep getting these requests on LinkedIn to demo AI tools that do research,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of done with it because it's all the same, and I don't know why we're repackaging the
Yeah.
same thing over. Anyway,
Well, there's two interesting things here. I think to think about. One is if we want our organizations to be more customer centric, I think we'd all be remiss to say, yeah, but you don't have to talk to customers.
right.
Right? That feels weird to me, right? I think the other thing is too, if we're talking about creating unique differentiated value, if we're talking about innovation, if we're talking about creating competitive advantage, right? Almost by definition, you're not going to get that from AI because AI is only going to tell you what has already been said, right?
Mhm.
Where innovation is going to come from the small little bit that you heard in the interview, right? That somebody said, well, wait, that's really interesting. Let me click on that. So almost by definition, innovation is going to come from what AI doesn't already know. And that's what we're trying to be out there. But you can do the 90% with AI. You still need to go out and try to find what nobody else in the world found, right?
Yeah, yeah, so true. We're at time, so
Okay.
it was an amazing session, chock full of things that we learned from,
Yeah.
and I hope people will go out and learn more about it. I
Yeah.
posted a link to Jobs to be Done Toolkit in the chat,
Nice.
and I will send it over one more
Okay.
time.
And connect with
But
me. Connect with me on LinkedIn too. I'd love to connect with people and have conversations over on LinkedIn.
yeah, let me post that link as well.
Okay.
Just
Thank
give
you,
me.
Michael. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Mohammed, Krista, Priscilla, Suli. Thanks. And thanks
Thanks,
to you,
guys.
Neha.
Of course, thank you for taking the time,
All right.
and teaching us all. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks
See you all
all.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.